Welcome to Behind the Badge with your special guest, Lieutenant Williams, your news source for all things police in the city of Fond du Lac.
Welcome back into News Talk 1450 and 100.7 KFIZ. Joining us now is Officer Clapper and Lieutenant Williams. Another edition of Behind the Badge. Good morning, guys. How's it going today?
Wonderful.
Good morning, Braden.
Really appreciate you guys stopping by. I know we got a question of the week, so let's jump right into what your question was this week, Officer Clapper.
Sure, it's kind of a twofold. The first part of the question is how come officers kind of come up to a intersection with a stop sign or stoplight and would turn on their emergency lights and siren to go through it and then turn them off afterwards. So that could be a few different things. It could be that they
just don't want to sit there and they want to get past it, right? That's what most people are probably thinking.
That's probably what most people think, but that's not what is happening. Unfortunately, we can't do that, and every time we turn on our emergency lights, our camera gets kicked on as well. So that's not what is happening. It could be a few different things. So the first thing, it could be the officer got dispatched to a call. That would be an emergency call, and maybe they got told by another officer to disregard that they didn't have to go anymore. Or maybe it was a call that sounded like it was going to be an emergency, and by the time they got more information, they had to downgrade their response based off of the facts provided. Could be sometimes we get dispatched to calls where necessarily we don't need to travel with our emergency lights or sirens on, but we got to get there quickly. So that's part of the second part of this question, which is why officers can speed, but there are a few things that exempts law enforcement from driving with emergency lights and siren on and being able to speed. So it's called a silent run. It could be a few different things. It could be if there's a felony in progress and someone's at danger, if they were to hear the suspect were to hear the police responding with their emergency lights and sirens on, or it could be a issue with destruction of evidence, or if we don't have enough information, like it's a crime in progress, it's a felony. So my thought would be like a bank robbery or something like that. Obviously it's important, we got to get there, but if we spook the people, we may not be able to get them before they get away. So there's a few exceptions as well to that, like if we're running radar or we're trying to pace a vehicle for their speed, we don't have to have our emergency lights or sirens on. So it's kind of a twofold of the question. Maybe they're going to a call like that, or maybe they just got told to disregard. So
definitely makes sense the more you kind of elaborated into that. I got a question about a squad car real fast. You turn the lights on, does the siren turn on too, or are those two different switches?
Two different switches. There's 3 different siren tones that we have. So the lights are one separate switch, so that we would use like maybe if we're blocking traffic, or if we're making a traffic stop, we don't necessarily need the siren on. Gotcha. And then we can press a button, or our horn actually as well changes our siren tones as well. So
gotcha, good to know. As you're kind of hitting on that question there, talking about showing up to, probably don't see it a whole lot here, but a bank robbery like that, you need to get there fast, but you don't want to alert with the bright lights or something like that as you get closer.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times when we're responding to emergency calls anyways, we'll turn off our lights and siren as we're getting closer to not alert people that we're coming. But that is a perfect example where some people may have seen officers driving with just their emergency lights on, so that they may question why they don't have their siren on. So that might fall under one of those exceptions that we talked about, because if there's something going on where there's a risk to the public, or you don't want to alert somebody that you're coming where they flee, that you could just use your emergency lights instead of your siren. But we still have to drive with due regard and be safe getting there. So
like you mentioned, safe getting there. So just because you could technically speed if you want to speed, you have to have a reason to speed as a police officer.
Basically, you have to have some sort of justification to do so. We still have to follow all traffic laws and such like that, unless there's, we're responding to one of those calls or operating in emergency mode or under one of those other exceptions.
Sometimes on the flip side too, it's also good to like be heard on your arrival. So we'll get like a fight in progress where there's like multiple people, like 20, 30 people involved in a fight. There's no way that one officer, when they arrived on scene, is going to be able to handle that. So if us responding with sirens kind of makes people disperse a little bit, or maybe think twice about the decisions they've made in their lives, we take that on, because through investigation we can usually find and track down everybody involved anyway, provided that we have a witness or someone that wants to talk to us. So sometimes that's a good thing for officer safety, is to kind of like get those people moving, and so they're not assaulting anyone anymore, and it can lessen the degree of injury.
Definitely makes sense there, right? You'll obviously spook the people, but you want to spook them in that case, to where, you know, if there's a fight happening, you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, if someone's just getting pummeled, you know, if that person then takes off running, that means they're not continuously pummeling them anymore. So as weird as it sounds, Fond du Lac's a small town. Most of these things get solved anyway, through word of mouth or whatever. So we will get them next time. We prefer to just make it nice and easy and get everything solved right then and there. But if it comes to that choice, or the choice of someone getting hurt more, we'll take that choice. We'll do the investigation.
Definitely makes sense. I know you were also wanting to hit on traffic crashes this morning.
Yeah, it's something that very common, and probably everybody have been in a traffic crash in their life. Have you been in a traffic crash?
What do you mean by traffic crash? I mean, like, I've hit a deer.
Okay, well, that counts. Yeah. So I've been in some, and it's a confusing part, and most people don't know what to do, and they don't know what law enforcement's responsibility is in a traffic crash. So law enforcement has a big responsibility, and it's kind of weird, because besides where the citation, because usually if there's a crash, there's something that went wrong with driving behavior or something, so that a citation needs to be issued. But we also have the traffic crash report. Now, the traffic crash report, one could argue, is probably more for insurance companies than for us. But it does help us kind of keep track of trends and things that are going on that would result into a crash. So we do get that information from a crash, but not everything deems a traffic crash report. So some of the things that depend on that is, for one, the amount of damage. So if it's over $1,000 damage, we have to do a traffic crash report. If someone's injured, we do a traffic crash report.
And with the way vehicles are made these days, $1,000 doesn't take much to add up.
Yeah, I'm almost surprised they haven't raised that threshold a little bit. But yeah, it's like nothing. Like, and it's off the officer's estimate. So like, let's say it's a dent in the bumper, and the guy takes it to his guy to get fixed, and he's like, "Oh no, this is $1,001." It is still not a reportable crash. It's what a normal amount would be. So a lot of times officers, because of what you just said, will just do the crash report, so they don't have to go through all that. But they're going to need your insurance info. If you don't have your insurance and you're involved in a crash, you will get cited. That's almost an automatic cite. If your driver's license obviously is suspended, revoked, that could be a higher threshold for fines. And we do encourage officers to cite the at-fault party. So if there is someone at fault, it is our encouragement that they get a citation, along with like seatbelt violations and stuff like that. So almost every single crash, there's a citation associated with it. And a lot of people are like, well, you're just adding insult to injury, basically. I just been in this crash, this traumatic moment, and now you're going to do this. Well,
a lot of the times, if you weren't on your cell phone, you're not going to get in that accident.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good point, and that is distracted driving is huge now. It's commonplace now, and everyone's had this, where they've driven behind someone that's just kind of swerving all left and right, and they're texting or sending a message or whatever, and it's dangerous. So yeah, you will get cited if we find out that's the reason for the crash. So don't be surprised if you're at fault for a crash, you probably get cited. The insurance company, if you have insurance, and you should, will take care of a large amount of the crash. So if you want access to the crash report, the officer has 10 days to complete it. Usually it's completed that day. For most instances, they complete it that day. Everything's digital now, so it'll be basically by the next day or the day after. You usually have it, but the officer does have up till 10 days to submit that traffic crash, and then you can actually submit and get a copy of that if you want it for your own records. But if you have insurance, a lot of times they handle all of that business for you.
Gotcha. And you mentioned, right, everybody should have insurance. Like you have to have insurance. If someone, we're gonna kind of go down a different hole here, but if you have insurance but you don't have your card on you at that point in time, that is still a ticketable offense, right?
It is still a ticketable offense. If you can prove that you were under insurance coverage at the time, it gets reduced to, I think it's like $15 now, or
$10.
$10. Yeah, so it's a real small amount. It's kind of like just a little slap on the wrist reminder. But always, anytime you pull someone over, they're always like paging through the pages and pages of expired insurance papers and registrations, and I'm guilty of it too. But what's slick now is a lot of them are on their phone, so they just kind of click, here it is, and that is pretty nice for the officers. And most of the time, the officer is just going to check your insurance, make sure that it's not expired, make sure you're covered during the period, and then they'll hand that right back to you. They need the name for the traffic crash report, and that's about it. So they need some other things, like where you're wearing a seatbelt. Obviously, if you're injured, we want to know that. If you have other PD parties in the car, they have to stick around because we need all of their information in the car crash. If you think about it, even a crash, everyone's fine, but I got to go to this appointment, and you take off, like, what is our evidence that you were there at all? And, all of a sudden you get an injury later or something like that. So you're kind of covering yourself for later by sticking around in a crash. So stick around, report it as soon as possible. We've had, we get hit and run crashes, and then there's an up fine there if we when we track you down. I won't say if, when we track you down.
So what if, let's say, both parties deem that an officer does not need to be at the accident, or is that really not even allowed either?
If it's a small amount crash, if it's a small crash, then yes, they can just exchange information with each other, and that is all. That they've met the requirement. They don't have to report it. Now, what ultimately always happens is they do that. One of them goes home and they're like, I don't know about this, and this person's kind of now not avoiding my phone calls or gave me the wrong number, and then they want to report it again, which makes it so much harder for us after the fact. So my advice, obviously I'm a little biased, is report it right away, because you don't know who you're dealing with. Yeah, they might seem like the nicest person, but why don't they want police involved? It's usually because they don't have a driver's license, but put it in our hands and not in your own.
So you mentioned an officer can have 10 days to file out the crash report. How long after an accident do you have to report it?
You should report it right away.
But if, say, you weren't, right? We kind of went down that.
Yeah. As soon as possible. There's no set time, but you could get cited for a failure report.
Gotcha.
So let's say we're looking for you, it's a hit and run, and you don't report it like for a week later, and we have to track you down, you're probably going to get that citation. But if you're, I don't know, on your way to the hospital and you hit someone and you get to the hospital and it's a little bit of a delay. Hey, I hit someone. This is it. It's somewhere over here. Okay, all right, we're reasonable people too. So.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Officer Clapper, Lieutenant Williams in this morning for Behind the Badge. Anything else before I let you get out of here?
Got a lot of hiring process coming up. CSO hiring process next week. So we need more community service officers. You still have time to get your application in. We're going to have a police officer hiring process in August, and a couple other things going on. So we need more peeps. So get your apps in.
Back to the crash topic, quick one. Last thing I wanted to hit on. People, I see this a lot where they're involved in a crash. It's pretty minor, but it's like at an intersection or stop sign, something like that. And they were always told not to move their vehicles, which, depending upon the circumstances, I would agree with. But also at the same time, if it's just a minor, like I accidentally let my foot off the brake, thinking the light was green, and we just, had a little taparoo. It's totally fine to move your vehicles out of traffic. And in fact, we actually encourage that to keep traffic flowing so we don't cause more crashes or something more severe to happen. So
That'll probably be the first thing we say to you is go ahead and pull in this parking lot over here.
Gotcha. Get out of the way, especially if it is a busy intersection or a stop sign like that. I guess one more thing before we close out today's show. I know we're going a little longer here. So there's a bigger accident and, there's glass or let's say the lights or something, and there's, debris on the road. Who's in charge of picking that up?
Us. We have brooms and shovels. We usually sweep it off to the side of the road so it won't get run over, and then we alert the city and they bring their sweeper out and get it. So we kind of take care of it for the now, but it's not for everything, and then the sweeper cleans up. So
Awesome, guys. Thanks for the insight. We will chat in 2 weeks. This has been Behind the Badge on News Talk 1450 and 100.7 KFIZ.